It started with a silence so deep it felt like a grave. Lena stood barefoot in the cold dirt, holding a sack with nothing in it. She wasn't crying. Crying was a luxury she'd burned out of herself years ago. She just stood still, hoping the world might forget she was there. She was nobody. The preacher's mistake. A ghost girl who learned to move without making a sound, because being noticed was dangerous. She trusted no one. Not the women who whispered behind their hands. Not the men whose eyes lingered too long. At 19, she knew mercy was just a pretty word people used before they shut the door in your face. The town of Dry Creek was just another stop on a road that led nowhere. Dust, tired buildings, and the same hard faces she'd seen everywhere else. She figured she could get a few days' work, keep her head down, and be gone before anyone learned her name. The saloon owner, Elsie, gave her a job washing dishes and a room out back. "Keep to yourself," she warned. "A lot of men here think a quiet girl is an easy girl." Lena nodded. She knew what silence could cost. On her third night, he walked in. He moved like a man who'd been walking through a world he didn't trust for a long time. Tall, broad shoulders, a coat that had seen too many winters. His hat was pulled low, but his eyes, when they met hers, didn't slide away. He looked at her like he saw something broken, and didn't want to break it worse. He came in every night after that. Sat in the same corner, never drank more than one glass, never spoke. The other men called him the ghost cowboy, said he had a past soaked in blood. Lena didn't believe gossip, but she believed in ghosts. She carried her own in her chest like a stone. Then one night, the sheriff came in, his face tight. "Trouble's coming," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That gang out of Clay County. They're heading this way." The room went quiet. Lena kept washing dishes, but her hands started to shake. Later that night, she stepped out back for a breath of cold air. She didn't hear him approach, just felt his shadow fall over her. It was the ghost cowboy. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice low and rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "You look like someone who's been hurt too much already." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like he knew. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight. "Nothing," he said. Then he paused. "Just didn't want you to be alone." His name was Caleb. He'd been a scout in the war, seen too much, lost more. He didn't ask about her past. She didn't offer hers. They both understood that some silences are full of things you can't say out loud. Then one morning, the gang came. They rode in fast, shot the sheriff down, and took the town without a fight. Elsie locked the saloon doors. Everyone inside held their breath. The old fear rose in Lena's chest, cold and hollow. But Caleb didn't freeze. He just turned to her, his eyes calm as ever. "You trust me?" She looked at the man who had never asked for anything, who had never even touched her hand. She nodded once. He took her fingers in his grip gentle. "You're safe now," he said. But safety had a price. And trust, she would soon learn, was a gamble that didn't always pay off. The gang didn't leave. They set up camp at the edge of town like they owned the place, their presence a slow poison seeping into Dry Creek. The town held its breath, waiting. Caleb stayed close to Lena, a silent guardian, but his calm felt different now. It was watchful, calculating, like he was measuring every shadow, every escape route. Suddenly Dry Creek wasn't so empty. New faces appeared, drawn by the scent of trouble. First was Thomas Bright, a railroad surveyor with hands too smooth and a smile too quick. He said he was mapping a new line, but his eyes mapped Lena, sizing her up with a cold hunger. Caleb watched him like a hawk. Then came Margaret Jensen, the preacher's widow, who'd left town months ago. She came back the day after the gang arrived, her face a mask of stone. She carried a silver locket she never opened and looked at Lena with an unnerving recognition, as if she knew the ghosts Lena was hiding from. The third was a young man named Eli. He claimed he was just passing through, but he spent his time asking questions. Questions about Caleb. He mentioned a name, Whisperer, a name that tasted like violence. When Lena asked Caleb about it, his face shut down. I don't go by that name anymore, was all he said. What was he running from? Why was he really here? One afternoon, Lena saw something that made her blood run cold. From the back porch of the saloon, she watched Margaret Jensen meet with one of the gang members, a brutal-looking man named Boone with a scar that split his face. Margaret handed him a small package wrapped in cloth. He took it without a word and disappeared. It was a secret exchange, a betrayal. That night, she told Caleb. He went still. What was it? I don't know. Money? A letter? Caleb ran a hand over his face. That woman knows more than she's letting on. So do a lot of people, Lena said, her eyes on his. A shadow crossed his face. You think I'm hiding something too? She didn't have to answer. He turned and walked away, the silence between them now sharp as a razor. The next morning, Thomas Bright, the surveyor, was found beaten bloody behind the stables. He packed his bags and rode out of town without a word, his smile finally gone. He wasn't a surveyor. He'd been looking for something, and he'd gotten too close. Later, Eli, the young question-asker, cornered Caleb behind the church. Lena found him afterward, his lips split, a fresh bruise darkening his cheek. Eli, Caleb grunted. He's not just passing through. What is he? A bounty hunter, Caleb said, his voice flat. There's a price on my head. The world tilted. Is it true? The stories? He finally looked at her. The truth laid bare in his tired eyes. Years ago, I rode with a gang like this one. I got out. But not before. Not before I had to kill a man. Not the way they think. But the blood's still on my hands. Caleb hadn't just found trouble in Dry Creek. He'd brought it with him. And now, she was standing right in the middle of it. Lena didn't run. She was done running. She found Eli at the blacksmith's. What do you want with him? She demanded. Justice, he said, his eyes cold. Or a payday? He gave a thin smile. Why not both? He's paid enough, she shot back. Blood debts don't expire, ma'am, Eli said, tipping his hat. And the price on Caleb Bishop's head is high. By the time she got back to the saloon, Caleb was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just an empty chair in the corner. Elsie said he'd ridden out at dawn. The hole he left in the room, in her chest, was vast and empty. He had disappeared, just like everyone else. He'd promised she was safe, and then he'd left her in the middle of the fire. Margaret found her staring at the empty chair. Men like Caleb, she said softly. They don't stay. Why did you help them? Lena asked, her voice hollow. The package you gave Boone. Margaret's face hardened. Because they know something about my son, and I will do anything to protect him. Lena's stomach sank. Your son is one of them? He was, Margaret whispered, a long time ago. Everyone in Dry Creek was drowning in secrets. Some ran, some paid, some prayed. Caleb had tried to run, and now Lena was alone again, with a gang that was settling in for the winter, and a feeling that the real storm hadn't even started yet. The days without Caleb were heavy, silent. Lena moved through her chores like a ghost. The world turned gray. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she was used to being alone. It was a lie, and it tasted like ash in her mouth. The gang grew bolder. Their leader, a man they called Carver, was coming. The name was spoken in whispers, laced with a fear that was sharp and metallic. One night, Elsie sat with her. He left to protect you, you know. He left, Lena said flatly. He saw that bounty hunter sniffing around, Elsie insisted. He drew the trouble away from you. Lena didn't want to believe it. Hope was a trap. She knew that better than anyone. But the thought took root anyway. A tiny, stubborn seed in the barren ground of her heart. 2 weeks later, he walked back in. He was bruised and dirty, his coat torn, but he was alive. He met her eyes across the smoky room, and something inside her that had been clenched tight for years finally let go. He sat in his corner. She brought him water. You ran, she said, her voice quiet. I thought I was doing the right thing, he admitted. I was wrong. They sat in silence for a long moment. Carver is coming, Caleb said finally. He runs this whole operation, Boone is just his dog. They're not just passing through. They're here for something. What? I don't know yet, but it's something they're willing to kill for. Are you staying? She asked, her heart in her throat. I don't want to run anymore, he said. But if I stay, you're in danger. I'm already in danger, she shot back. He reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers. I came back for you, Lena. Her throat tightened. She turned her hand over and gripped his. Then stay. But don't lie to me again. I won't. That was the start of the fight. Caleb wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a man with a purpose. He started helping around town, fixing things, talking to people. The town started looking at him differently. So did Lena. One night she told him her story. The preacher's house. The whispers. The baby she'd buried in a nameless grave behind a church in another dusty town. He told her about Kansas, about the boy who died in his arms during a raid, a death he blamed himself for. I froze, he whispered in the dark. Just for a second. It was enough. We're both broken, she said. Maybe, he answered, his shoulder brushing against hers. Or maybe we just fit together. The day Carver arrived, the whole town felt the air change. He was clean-shaven, polite, and smiled like a politician. But his eyes were cold as a snake's. He and his men took over the town hall, their rifles a silent promise of what was to come. That night, Caleb, Lena, Elsie, and Margaret met in the saloon's cellar. We can't beat them with guns, Caleb said. But maybe we can break them from the inside. He looked at Margaret. Carver's here for something. What is it? Lena had a sudden, chilling thought. Margaret, she said slowly. Your locket. The one you never open. Margaret's hand flew to her neck. With trembling fingers she opened it. Inside wasn't a picture. It was a tiny folded piece of paper. A key to a bank box in Cheyenne. What's in it? Caleb asked. Proof, Margaret whispered, her face pale. Proof of who he is, and what he did. Who is he? Lena pressed. Margaret looked at them, her eyes full of a mother's agony. His name isn't Carver. It's Samuel Jensen. He's my son. The confession hung in the cellar, thick and suffocating. Samuel Jensen, the boy who'd run away years ago, had become Carver, the monster at their door. The letter in the locket wasn't from him. It was a confession from his dying father, the preacher, detailing the crimes they had committed together. Carver wasn't just after money. He was here to bury his past. He was here to silence his own mother. The plan was simple, desperate. Confront Carver with the truth. Use his own history as a weapon. But someone talked. 2 nights later, Carver's men stormed the saloon. They were looking for the key. Caleb and Lena escaped out the back, but Elsie was taken hostage. The plan was in ashes. Worse, the key was gone. Stolen from Margaret's room while she slept. Just when Lena thought things couldn't get any worse, Eli the bounty hunter rode back into town. This time, he wasn't alone. He had a federal marshal with him. Caleb Bishop, the marshal announced. You're under arrest for the murder of Deputy Ross Leland. It was a trap. Carver had orchestrated it all. He'd used Margaret's love, Caleb's past, and the town's fear to corner them completely. He appeared on the saloon balcony, smiling down at the scene. Looks like your time's up, Whisperer, he called out. Caleb looked at Lena, his face grim. This is what falling apart looks like, she whispered, her hope finally gone. No, he said, his eyes blazing with a sudden fire. This is what happens right before we burn it all down. The trap wasn't for Caleb. It was for Carver. As the marshal moved to put irons on Caleb, Eli drew his second pistol and aimed it squarely at Carver. You made a mistake, Sam, Eli said, his voice ringing through the silent street. You thought I worked for you. Thomas Bright, the railroad surveyor, stepped out of the crowd, a Pinkerton badge pinned to his coat. 2 more armed men appeared on the rooftops. Carver's smile vanished. What is this? This, Bright said, is what happens when you steal from the railroad. It was never about the town. It was about a hidden ledger detailing Carver's railroad scams. A ledger the preacher had hidden before he died. A ledger Carver thought his mother knew the location of. He'd terrorized the town to force her hand. "You have nowhere to go, Jensen," the marshal said. Carver, Samuel, looked at his mother, standing in the crowd, her face a mask of grief. Then he looked at Caleb. He laughed, a wild, broken sound. "If I'm going down, I'm taking him with me." He drew his gun, but he didn't aim at Caleb. He aimed at Lena. Everything happened at once. Caleb shoved Lena to the ground. Eli fired at Carver. Boone, Carver's man, fired at Eli. Lena scrambled behind a water trough as the street exploded in gunfire. This wasn't a plan anymore. It was a slaughter. When the smoke cleared, Eli was down, clutching his arm. Boone was dead. And Carver was staggering toward the church, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Caleb ran after him. Lena didn't think. She just ran too. She found them inside the church. Carver was slumped in the front pew, his blood staining the polished wood. Caleb stood over him, his gun lowered. "It's over," Caleb said. "Not yet," Carver rasped, looking past him at his mother, who had just entered the church. "Tell me you forgive me, Mother." Margaret stood frozen, her face torn. Tell me!" he screamed, his voice rattling. "I can't," she whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. "God can, but I can't." A final ragged breath escaped Carver's lips, and then there was only silence. The rain came the next morning, washing the blood from the streets. The law took the bodies and the rest of the gang. Dry Creek was free. But Lena felt hollow. She stood by the window in the saloon, watching the rain. She had picked up a gun. She had been ready to kill. The girl who knew how to be small and quiet was gone. In her place was a woman she didn't recognize. Caleb found her there. "I figured you needed space," he said. "I don't want to be a hero," she whispered. "I don't feel like one." "Walk with me," he said. They walked to the old wagon bridge. He told her the rest of his story. The deputy he'd killed in Kansas. It had been an accident, a ricochet in a firefight. But he'd run anyway, convinced he was a monster. "Maybe we both are," Lena said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I would have killed him, and I'd do it again." "No," Caleb said, taking her arm gently. "We're survivors. We did what we had to when no one else would. That doesn't make us monsters. It makes us human." She leaned against him, finally letting herself feel the weight of it all. "What do people like us do," she whispered, "when the fight is over?" "We learn how to live," he said. It sounded impossible, but standing there, with his heart beating steady against her ear, she wanted to believe it. Spring came to Dry Creek. The town began to heal. Elsie repainted the saloon. Margaret started a garden behind the church, turning the soil over and over, planting new life. Caleb stayed. He didn't promise, he just stayed. He fixed fences, hauled water, and slowly, the town started to see him not as a ghost, but as a man. One morning, he found Lena by the creek. He held out his hand. In his palm was a ring, hammered from a silver coin. "I've never done this before," he said quietly. "Me neither," she whispered. "You sure you want someone with all this behind her?" she asked. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I want someone who knows how to fight, and stay, and forgive. Even if it takes a while." She didn't say yes. She just took the ring and put it on her own finger. They built a small cabin at the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it had a porch, and Caleb built a shelf for the books Lena was starting to collect. She planted wildflowers along the path. One day, she found him staring out at the hills, a look of peace on his face she'd never seen before. "It's finally quiet," he said. Lena took his hand. It wasn't the silence of a grave anymore. It was the silence of a home. A quiet place to heal, to grow, to finally live. Justice doesn't always come with a badge, Sometimes it comes from the hands of broken people who refuse to stay down. If you believe that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that everyone deserves a second chance at peace, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You never know when you'll need a reminder that even after the loudest storm, there can be quiet again.